Over the last couple of weeks, we've been discussing how to develop and flesh out your main characters. So today we're going to figure out how to add a little bit more detail, add some more personality to these characters. What's up, Luke? Want to come up? I play a lot of Dungeons and Dragons. Don't worry, this is going to be relevant in a minute. And I use the 5th edition rule set, and one of the really nice things, really helpful things, really considerate things that they included in 5th edition is a list of potential personality traits for all these different backgrounds. If your character spent their time living in a temple or researching things in a library, it's got some suggested personality traits, some flaws, some bonds, and some ideals that will help you figure out what your character is like. And I think that that is a really helpful method for us to develop our characters, and we can even lift things straight from these books. So I'm going to go ahead and work on main character's personality traits today. The character in my next novel, the one that I think I'm going to write during NaNoWriMo in November, is running for president. This does mean that I will have to do some research, and by that I probably mean rewatching all of The West Wing. The closest analogy I can find for that personality trait in this book is the noble. And some things are going to be different, but probably less than we might think. We may have to make some adjustments, but I actually think this is going to be a really helpful exercise. So in 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons, there are 4 basic major personality traits it can give you. The first is just traits, and these are pretty general. When you're creating a character, it recommends that you take 2 of these, and there are 8 under each background. We're going to roll a d8 to choose ours. You don't have to roll randomly, but for this exercise, I think it's really helpful. This can be a really good way for us to break out and figure out characters without, just writing versions of ourselves again. If we have a random roll and a completely different resource that we didn't write, like this book, that's going to be a really helpful way for us to make sure that these characters feel distinct as we create new ones. The second personality trait is an ideal. The third is a bond with some other character, or force or group. And the fourth is a flaw. We're going to start with our 2 personality traits. We're going to roll the d8. All right, the first one is an 8. If you do me an injury, I will crush you, ruin your name, and salt your fields. And I want to remind you, this is a character who is running for president. So already we have a very interesting character. The second is a 2. The common folk love me for my kindness and generosity. Those 2 things are very interesting together because we've essentially created a really fascinating dichotomy. We've created someone who is beloved by the people, but absolutely holds grudges. I'm thinking about the best character to ever play a president in any piece of media, and that's Kevin Kline's Dave from the movie Dave, which unfortunately, he is literally playing a president in the film. It's a doppelganger scenario as he's filling in indefinitely. Such a good movie, and I won't get into it all here, but he is a great president because he's a good guy, and that is what comes through from this trait. However, if you do me an injury, I will crush you, ruin your name, and salt your fields. We've had a lot of presidents who have been very, I don't know about always public, but we've definitely come to know for a lot of them that this is how they operated. I think the current guy actually probably operates a lot under this mentality, which is bad and toxic. And he's very public about it, which is also bad and toxic. But putting these 2 things together where someone is, we'll not say in the case of the current guy, we're going to say this is someone who's actually beloved for kindness and generosity. And for all intents and purposes, our character, she's going to be running for president and genuinely loved for kindness and generosity and genuinely has these traits. It's not all a sham. But also, she holds a grudge. And that's going to, I'm sure, come into play in interesting ways during the story. Next, we're going to figure out her ideal. And this could be really interesting because one of them is an evil ideal. And that's the one I got. Okay, first of all, this doesn't necessarily mean the character is evil, but this ideology lends itself very well to an evil character. Power is her ideal. If I can attain more power, no one will tell me what to do. Okay, so we've created a character who is running for president for the wrong reason. And what is fundamentally the wrong reason. And probably, I don't know about the worst reason, but probably the most obvious wrong reason that you can have when you're running for president. And that's interesting. I don't know how that's going to go. That's going to be very interesting. Now let's figure out her bond. These tend to be the ones that need the most finessing when you're taking them out of the sort of standard medieval fantasy realm that D&D assumes you're playing in. But we'll see what happens. 3. Nothing is more important than the other members of my family. Okay, that works. That works really well. There's an assumption in this book, in this sort of noble ideal, that your family is also nobles. But they don't have to be, especially if we're taking someone and making them someone who's running for president. You know, nothing's more important than my family. This could be anything. So we'll come back to that when we are developing this character. But for now, you know, she loves her family. The last one is her flaw. I feel like we've already got 2 pretty big ones in her character, so this is going to be very interesting. Okay, that's a 1. I secretly believe that everyone is beneath me. That tracks with the character we've created so far. You actually see how that lines up. Like, this is someone who is kind and generous and genuinely has those traits, but she also has this sense of superiority. She wants to be someone that no one else can tell them what to do. Her family is very important to her, which does set her apart from our current president, which is nice. Because a lot of these other traits are shared by the dude who's currently in the office, who's the worst human, I think. I think he's the worst human. Probably one of the worst we've had. He's very bad. But I don't want to write that character. I don't want to write the current guy. I want to write someone who the audience can like and understand. There's also a little bit of Frank Underwood here, which I can respect. But my goal is going to be try to make sure this character is as empathetic as possible and try to make sure the audience really understands the choices that she makes. We'll talk about that more another time, but that definitely will factor into some of the plot ideas I've already had, and we'll talk about that another time. That's going to do it. I think you can find these lists online pretty easily. You can also buy the book, but you can find the resource of, you know, what are the random roles for these different backgrounds. There are a lot of background ideas out there. For example, if I wanted to, you know, establish a doctor character, I might use the sage background, because that is somebody who spends a lot of time doing research. That would also be fantastic for a scientist. There's a sailor and a pirate. There's an urchin. There's a hermit and an outlander, and those tend to be much more specific to the sort of Fantasyland setting, especially guild artisan, which I've never known what to do with that background. The whole idea is that you're like a painter or a bricklayer or a glass blower, and like I don't know what to do with that. There's an entertainer, and that can be fantastic if you're writing a story about an actor or a dancer or a painter, but not of houses, but of like paintings. So that is interesting. You've got the criminal or the charlatan. So it's a very helpful resource. There are expanded versions of these lists out there. There are more options as backgrounds go. And I wouldn't be surprised if there are modern versions. You know, if I went out looking, I'm sure I could find like the politician, but this worked perfectly serviceably because all it did was give us a jumping off point, because now my character has a very interesting personality. Thank you so much for watching the video. If you liked it, hit the like button. If you want to see more, hit the subscribe button. If you want to see more, but like actually see when they come up and like get a little thing on your phone or on your computer, hit the bell. And would you vote for this person if you knew that these traits were what they had as president? I'd like to know that in the comments below. Let me rephrase. What would make you vote for this person? Leave that in the comments below. Thanks so much for watching. I love you, Victoria.